we can start. On behalf of Cumulus, I want to welcome all of you to this session today. I'm delighted to meet all of you. So let me just give you a bit of a background why we are meeting today. I think as you are here, you all know more or less about the New European Bauhaus initiative that has been launched from the top level and introduced from President Ursula von der Leyen. And to me, from the very first moment, it was incredibly inspiring to see how the key things of the New European Bauhaus, beautiful, sustainable, and togetherness, are resonating with the work that we are doing. I think we're all working around sustainability and sustainment, even if we're not calling it like this. I think we share the same understanding. And beautiful and beauty, that's something we're going to talk about today as well, is of course a cornerstone that we're working around in design from very different perspectives. And together is something that in Cumulus, as a large community and family that is willing to share and learn from each other, and a practice that we're also doing with our sort of local context and our smaller parts of the ecosystems, this commoning, this sharing. So that spoke a lot to us. So it's a pleasure today. So, and I'm, as I said, we're more than 10 of our members, partners as well. I'm happy that we're having a couple of partners today here. And together with our president, Mariana Amatullo, she will speak in a minute to you. And my colleague, Venka Purushotomann from LaSalle College of the Arts in Singapore, we sort of brainstormed and developed two core ideas that we want to discuss with you today. Because on the one hand, we want to be very open to resonate with your needs and your ideas. But on the other hand, we want to give you a space where you can locate yourself, where you can contribute. And of course, this session will be recorded. Thank you for reminding me, Anna. So this means we can share it afterwards as well, so that we can address a bit more people than are here today. Because, I mean, with its 360 members, Cumulus is an incredible network. We have an incredible possibility to engage about 1 million students. So I think there's a huge potential that I'm hoping to unlock and kicking this off today. I'm happy that we also have some non-Cumulus guests being here today, but of course they are from our sort of network of friends and close collaborations, and I'm sure that this Cumulus plus New European Bauhaus initiative will give us a lot of opportunities to intensify our collaborations. In general, we will sort of give you some perspectives and standpoints for about an hour, and then we have about half an hour discussion with all of you. So there will be the opportunity to introduce yourself. I will ask you to share some information about you in the chat and in the Miro board a bit later, so that what we're doing here is kept in a way that makes a lot of sense. Venka, anything to add from your side before we are sharing too much secrets? What we are going to do?
Thank you, Philip. Thank you. It's really wonderful to see all of you here today, and really to echo what Philip is saying. I think this is a really exciting project, and from our perspective, we are really looking at new, what we call entry points in the way we actually review, redesign, rethink cultural practices through education and other means. So it's truly wonderful to really rethink, practices from a ground up initiated. So hence, really, truly delighted to be part of this enterprise. Thank you, Philip.
Yes, and now I'm very happy, Venka, that we can have Mariana's perspective. And in our conversations from the very beginning, Mariana pointed out how important this initiative for Cumulus will be and is. And of course, I have my thoughts on that as well. but I want to give the floor to you to share your perspectives, and I think we will respond to that. Happy that you are here today, Mariana.
Thank you. So let me start by a very warm welcome to everyone joining the session, and really with also a thank you to our secretariat for being a facilitator here, and and Aya Salmi as well for her work as our Secretary General in ensuring that Cumulus would be a partner of this very important initiative. So I'm grateful to that work that has seeded and preceded this conversation. And of course, I want to say thank you to Philipp, who is the hardest working vice president of any executive board I've known, who is really a thought leader for us in the board and for Cumulus in kicking off this initiative, and to our wonderful member and leader in Singapore, Venka, for being an instrumental partner in curating some of these initial thoughts for this session. I will just make a couple of remarks. The first one saying, coming from the global south, originally from Argentina, being situated in the global north, but outside Europe in the US, and having grown up very formative years in Europe, I see this initiative, of course, as an European focused initiative, but it is my hope that it can inspire a larger and more global conversation. And I think that even the participation in this session, as I look at names and last names, point to that. And of course, having Venka as part of this curation of thoughts is a signal for us from Cumulus, an association with 360 members, 61 countries around the world, and an association that, of course, was started in Europe, but is growing very fast outside Europe. We are really committed to taking this invitation to be an official partner of the New European Bauhaus and sort of probe, its significance from a global perspective. If anything, I believe that all of us as educators, academics, researchers have seen in the last 18 months with the global pandemic, what a fragile and interconnected sort of planet we're in, and how some of the agendas that are outlined in these initiatives are really global ones, that there is no more I believe, time to think in a way that is narrow. We have to be transdisciplinary, and we have to embrace our interconnectedness. And so it is my hope that what Cumulus can bring to the New European Bauhaus is a vibrant conversation that can be critical, that can be inclusive, and that can move the agenda forward of art and design education. As a researcher in the space of design for social innovation, the recurring question that I asked in all of my writing and research is, how do we sort of advance the role of design as a discipline that can bring to us new opportunities for participation that are really important as we move from a world that was complicated to a world that has become complex, and where it is really the wicked problems of our time that management and linear sort of mental models are no longer sufficient to address. And I believe that, again, the spirit with which the New European Bauhaus was launched, coming at a time of profound reckoning when it comes to issues of systemic racism, when it comes to issues of the climate emergency crisis, as the recent IPCC report has shown us. This is a time of huge urgency, and it is a time like no other for design to take a stance and really connect in a way that pushes forward new social, cultural, and inclusive agendas worldwide. So with that, again, I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank all of you who are here. And I look forward to being part of this initiative from my standpoint of president, from my standpoint of design researcher, and be part of what we can sort of shape together in the coming weeks and months. So I will turn it back over to Philipp with my gratitude.
Thank you, Mariana, for this word, highlighting out the importance that this initiative has for Cumulus. And of course, you mentioned some key points. We thought in the beginning, the New European Bauhaus, how can we relate that? And one of the first discussions that we had was, of course, that there's a difference between Europe and the European Union. And we want to encourage the people that are outside of the European Union, but in Europe, to connect with them. And in the next step, we decided we need to have all the different perspectives. You're mentioning the Global South. And I hope that even if I'm encouraged by the names that I see and the destinations, that I can guess where you're from, the origins, that we will get an even bigger sort of plurality. And without knowing exactly what is allowed or not allowed, or expected or not expected, when the European Bauhaus has been launched, I understand that such a critical question cannot be addressed by a country, by a school, or by Europe alone, but we are starting with Europe and using this in Europe also to sort of reinterpret and redefine sort of what Europe can be, but with the help of partners from outside that have a look at Europe and that sort of help us to reflect our own position, what is more than important in the world of today. So what Venka and I will share with you are two ideas before we have our speakers. And I'm happy to at least briefly introduce them to you, that you know what you can expect to hear in the next half hour or so, 45 minutes. We will have Albert Fuster from Elisava, he's academic director and teacher itself, and also an European Bauhaus partner and a DESIS member. So he brings together a lot of things. And as you know, DESIS is a partner organization of Cumulus and a partner of European Bauhaus now as well. And he will share a bit of his perspectives, what is super important. And I know Albert from a lot of other collaborations. And then I'm happy that we have Carlos Teixeira here from IIT Chicago. Needless to say how important IIT Chicago is for the Bauhaus. So he's a step between the European Bauhaus or the Bauhaus in Dessau. And then Laszlo Molinoc going to Chicago, building the school there. And we are very curious to hear sort of your perspective on your role in the European Bauhaus. And we also have Teresa Franquera here. I'm very happy. She's my colleague to co-chair the working group on leadership and strategy on Cumulus. And part of the work here also comes from this working group and will be supported by this working group. And she is in University of Aveiro, not only a Cumulus member, but also the director of DESIS. And University of Aveiro is also an European Bauhaus partner. So we see there is a little, I wouldn't say confusion, but there are a lot of overlaps. And I think we need to sort of unpack the boxes. And I think the challenge that we will have is to find a way so that we can contribute in a meaningful way and come to a point where we can have impact with what we are doing in the very near future. So Venka, do you think, and of course, we have Alessandro Rancati. I'm very happy that you are here. You are not a European Bauhaus partner, but you are from the EU Policy Lab. And I met you for the first time at the end of May in an information setting with a lot of partners of the European Bauhaus. And everybody was super interested in listening what the other ones are doing. And it was pretty much about who can network with whom, but not really going deep into what people can do together. And I think this is what we're trying to kick off today. And I'm very happy that you can join the session as well. share some impressions that you have, maybe way deeper in knowing what's going on. And as mentioned on your website, you will end the phase of collecting the contributions right now and look for potentials for key principles from this listening phase, as you called it right now. So this curation process is a very emergent process also. It's a bottom-up process, and I think this sounds very familiar to us as well. So Venka, do you want to start to talk a bit about the regional labs, or should I talk about the atlas? It's completely up to you.
Why don't you start off with the atlas, then I'll jump into the labs.
That's perfect. So please allow me, of course I'm allowed, but to share my screen. So here you see a bit what I've been talking about right now. And in general, actually, we're talking about beauty, we're talking about experiences, and we're talking about Cumulus giving the global dimensions to the new European Bauhaus. And a couple of keywords that came to mind when we talked were, of course, the planetary challenges that we're all facing and that we're talking about in all our sort of meetings. Social innovation, so many of us are involved with social innovation. You see sustainability pretty much in the middle of the bubbles. And as I mentioned, it's very core to us. Transformation processes, this is something we're talking a lot because the educational sector is in transformation as well and can contribute to transformations. We're looking at peripheries, understanding that peripheries is just a matter of standpoint. Regardless of size and history, trying to redefine what peripheries can be through bottom-up processes, through new notions of commoning, through strengthening regions. And when we're talking about regions, I think it's always super interesting to talk about bioregioning as well, because this gives a very new notion to borders and the regions. I will share this board with you afterwards. So in the working group leadership and strategy, we've been working a lot on sort of exchanging ideas about new initiatives, new ways of teaching, new ways of collaborating that are emerging between the different schools, but also between the schools and their external partners. And sort of one of the two initiatives that we want to suggest to our members and to the partners of the members is the Atlas of Opportunities. So we want to create an atlas, we want to create an overview with the most interesting ways and future forms of education that are interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, transnational, and approaches of learning, formal learning, informal learning, lifelong learning in the very global context. We need to look for new methodologies and modes of collaboration without setting them. We're just discussing them, and we're sure they will emerge, and different levels of change will be addressed, from small scale change to systems level change. We understood that even if we have super prestigious schools, not only in Cumulus, but as well here today, that the best school or program is not one school. It is many, it is hybrid, it is open. So the question is, instead of building the one global school, how can we use the benefit of the people in the schools all over the world, the excellent schools all over the world, in a definition that is beyond the higher education ranking, how we can set up something together. And this is something that we want to bring in an atlas. In this process, we want to learn with and from each other. We want to innovate our institutions through bottom-up and sandbox activities. We want to support pioneering institutions. We heard very often we're doing awesome things, even from sort of deans, provosts, or rectors, but we need help in our local environment to make clear that what we're doing is meaningful. So we want to achieve that being on our atlas can become something like a quality seal that helps the people that are the agents of transformation and change. We understood that KPIs for the schools are about to change, they need to change, and we want to develop new criteria in a bottom-up process. So we want to work on situated knowledge, situated action beyond classrooms. More and more of us are leaving the classrooms to address the challenges. We want to be very inclusive and open access. And we want to talk about good practice. I like this term way more than best practice because it's way more open and inviting, because excellence is always about excluding, and it's all about inclusion here. Good practice from different cultures, from different practices, from different contexts and understandings of design. So when you create such an atlas, of course, you need to think about criteria. So what we want to put in, it will contain very rich information about cases of emerging practices. Those might be super interesting projects that are held by one or more partners together. And we want to look for contributions. This is what we know what works, because we're starting to do this in our working group for quite a while, to understand who's involved in the process, who are the institutions, which level of change is intended, which sort of level of transdisciplinarity are you having. Then about the sector. So this is something I think that Carlos will talk about as well. Health, energy, mobility, because the sectors seem to be very, very relevant to connect to external partners to come up to meaningful contributions. We want to learn what is unconventional, what's the meaning of places and regions, and with what are the design methodology or methodologies used, because we know we need to change them. And we want to create sort of new relations based on the shared formats. So we hope to have in a 1 year's time, a wonderful atlas where we can come up with a lot of contributions that see how the design education is changing, because Cumulus, in my understanding, needs to pioneer in giving an answer how the future design education needs to change. Quite a few institutions are working on that as well. I will talk about it in a minute. And I would say that in a very continuous process that is also fed from bottom up, Cumulus will work on the future of design education through the new European Bauhaus from a global perspective. And something that spoke a lot to me in the last days when I went into the wonderful book, Designs, and very important book, Designs for the Pluriverse, by Arturo Escobar. Criteria could be something sort of, because of course we need to know who's invited. Everybody's invited, but what to submit, with whom should it resonate? And I think it should resonate with active people in the institutions that are working toward practices that are participatory, socially oriented, situated and open-ended, and that challenge the business as usual mode of being, producing and consuming. And we're looking for frameworks that pay attention to questions of place, the environment, experience, politics, and the role of digital technology in transforming design context. So it's not just only about creating a wonderful project together. And I think all of us here are very experienced in creating those projects together, but maybe giving them a new direction and doing this through sharing. So what we want to do, and we are starting today, is to have 6 Atlas conversations or Atlas sessions. And in each session, 3 cases will be shared and discussed with the interested community. And this session will be recorded and key aspects will be extracted to describe the project or the case. The first one should be by the end of the year. We will come up to dates later on. And in 2022, we will have 7 more. So this will lead to at least 21. And of course, Atlas seems to be a little bit misleading, because even if me coming from Cologne would suggest something, of course, other regions and partners will be involved. So it might look a little bit like a map with flight connections and a map with dots that are overlaid in a lot of layers. And we hope and we're sure, are very sort of convinced that this process will help you who are going to contribute, to give you a voice, to resonate with us, and us to inform the process, and maybe also to be a Trojan horse or a Trojan mice, a term that I learned just last week from Andrew Goodman, who's here right now, in being an agent of transformation from bottom up. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're going to do with this, with those conversations. So it's an invitation to all of you to share a practice in your institution that might be beyond the curriculum, that might involve other stakeholders as well, to discuss it here. And we take the responsibility to curate in terms of facilitate it in a way that it can disseminate in the channels that we as this global association are having. Venka, did I forget something?
No, you covered this wonderfully. Very, very comprehensive. Yeah. So shall I talk about the second initiative?
Yeah, please.
All right, so welcome everyone. And the second initiative that we are thinking of is to invite members to host a lab, a regional lab, or in a way that we are trying to broaden the conversation and really broaden the conversation by developing microcosms of centers where members can actually articulate their interests and their concerns from where they are located. And this is an important part of what Philipp talked about, the situatedness, and location and locales do provide an insight into how we might want to address the meta concepts of the new Bauhaus. So we want to invite members to really look at how they can host a lab, a regional lab, and through that lab, using existing practices and existing concerns within their organization, within their communities that already coexist, to really develop a critical reflection of emerging themes. So ultimately, one of the key features of regional labs is to really flesh out from the grassroots emerging themes that will become central to the larger articulation of what the new Bauhaus could potentially be. And we want to look at ways that these labs can help unpack, the conventional and provide for non-conventional methodologies or new paradigms to inform how, for example, design education itself could move forward for the future. So we want to invite new localized concerns. It could range from anything from bio concerns to food security to developing new ecologies around health. There could be a myriad of concerns that are not necessarily uniform across continents, countries, cities, and suburbs. So in wanting to move away from vertical and hierarchical and center periphery kind of conversations, we want to develop a multiplicity of ecosystems of concerns that might emerge and that can inform into a larger contribution to discourse making for design. So in this regard, we welcome members to volunteer and put your hand up to say, yes, we will host a regional lab. And we hope to kickstart these labs later in this year, and start to build a case on how these labs can emerge and inform each other. An important part of these labs is the fact that, we would, while things might be very localized within institutions, their own research practices or their communities, we also want that injection of a global or the external perspective in these conversations. So how do organizations and institutions bring externality, to really peer through or look through another form of a prism to understand their concerns and issues? And could there be some shared learning and shared discourse making along the way? So it's also kind of a principle that we want to guide that members through. So we hope to host at least one major lab by end of the year. and then welcome more labs over the course of the next year, and so in order to build, a repository of creative outcomes and really critical reflections of issues. And we hope to ultimately pull all of this together into a symposium and a publication. So this is the pathway that we are actually seeking to take through. But what we will be doing is we will also be working with, Philipp, myself, and others would be working with the hosts of these labs and also serve as guides to kind of, support and find ways of developing the research questions or the applied activities that they might necessarily want to do. So these are the kinds of practices that we want to see emerge out of these labs. We will be post the meeting today, presentations and conversations today, we will be fleshing out more details, via email to all members, so that we could actually, welcome members to participate in these regional labs. Over to you, Philipp.
Yes, I think that resonates perfectly. So maybe two things to add. I mean, first, you've been talking about the new concerns, and I like when you always talk about engines, sort of that bring together conversations and crystallize them around a specific topic. And I think this is something that we also discussed. Should we suggest them? But this is something I think that the regional labs can completely do on their own. So as you said, so we don't want to limit everything to food,
That's right,
to soil, or to whatever, but this is a very high recommendation. And I'm more than happy that you are with me, Venka, because you bring in the expertise of being the founder or co-founder also of the Asian Pacific Network for Cultural Education and Research, ANCAR. I think you have a lot of experience in running those labs, for example, in Vietnam or in Mongolia. And I think you can bring in this experience, how to set it up in a way that speaks into the region and that gives voice to people into the region, and that is of interest for other ones as well. So we want to use this as a blueprint in iteration. So we know that it works, and if it works in the Asian Pacific area, I think we can make it work here as well. We will give you some more details after the other presentations. So I think this is the thing that we had in mind, and in general, I think this atlas is pretty much more from the academia side. And of course, many of the projects are live projects, are projects that are situated in places and that are integrating other people as well. So this is the invitation to share this knowledge and to create new bridges and links. And I think the labs are very meaningful in terms of investigating placemaking and getting in touch with people outside from the arts and design sector in a smaller scale. So there are two very different options and opportunities. And we will do our best from the Cumulus side to try to see how we can support those regional labs, how we can support the people who say, yes, we want to go for that and run such a lab. And yes, so those are the two streams that we're going to suggest. And now I want to invite our three guests to talk a little bit about what they are doing. And I'm very sure that what they are doing even resonates with what we are planning here right now, because I think this is super important not to put an extra burden to what we are doing right now, but to create a space of opportunities for you to support you in this sort of change that you're doing on site. And Albert Fuster, I would be very happy if you could share your perspective from Elisava in Barcelona, your intentions as a European Bauhaus partner, and how the suggestions that we shared sound to you, maybe.
Great, thank you. Thank you all, especially Philipp and Venka, for inviting me to this session. And yes, I would like to first of all, highlight the fact that European Bauhaus is an institutional initiative that brings beauty at the forefront of the discussion on which society and planet we aim to live in and will contribute to build. So in this sense, I feel that New European Bauhaus adds layers to the SDGs developed by the UN. And these layers are key issues in which design, arts, and media schools and universities are experts. So I think it's a great opportunity for these schools to play a leading role in developing these initiatives. When we talk about beauty and aesthetic sensitivity, maybe these are not the most popular terms in society, because it is believed that there are the bare necessities, the real stuff, and then this layer, which is like a skin, like a shape of the wall, that is what is beautiful, what is aesthetic. But here I feel really comfortable in recovering the idea of beauty that was developed in the last 2 centuries by people like Schopenhauer or Oscar Wilde or Marcel Proust, believing that beauty is a path to knowledge. So from design schools, we have to assume that this aesthetic sensitivity is not only a frame or not only a final finishing for stuff, but is fundamental. And also in the same sense, I think that we have to stress, as Virginia Woolf also stated, the fact that beauty can be a tool to identify and find meaning. And that means that it can be a social and political tool to search and develop self-identities, a collective meaning, and to raise awareness on key issues related to human beings and the planet. And this is why I believe that from design schools, we have to feel really strong and really confident in considering form, visualization, and materiality as fundamental concerns for the whole humanity and the planet, and key tools to interact with many other disciplines that are working in this better future that we expect. So shortly, I will try to share my screen just to, looks like I won't be able to do it right now. So no, I just wanted to share the portfolio we've been working on from Elisava that we've shared with all the New European Bauhaus community. And in this portfolio, I believe there are 2 issues that have to be highlighted. On the one hand, as mentioned, the assumption that image, form, materiality, texture, message, typography are key tools for creative disciplines to interact with other disciplines, so that we have to feel, as mentioned, confident that this is something that is coming at the forefront, that is not the end, the last step of many other processes and methods or techniques or disciplines that are working on that, but is at the forefront. And the second issue I wanted to highlight is the fact that many of the projects that we have selected for this portfolio, and this links to what Philipp and Venka already said, are developed with people, with communities, with research centers and EU-funded projects, with companies like Adidas Maker Lab in Nuremberg or Cave Home in Barcelona, with institutions as the Barcelona Municipality or Desis Network, or NGOs like Fundació Arrels, also in Spain, or Design for Development in Senegal. So this idea of design with, that has been spread by Ron Wackery in last conferences, I think it's really important because brings together these key layer that New European Bauhaus brings on the board. That means that, at least in terms of Elisava, this involvement in the platform is first of all allowing us to get self-consciousness of where we are as an institution, who we are, and where would you like to move on. So this is like a self-reflection needed constantly, and that this platform is openly allowing. The second layer is that it allows us to develop precise, concrete projects. And here we are working to invite all our students to develop their final degree projects next academic year in the clusters and the threads that we have open for this New European Bauhaus portfolio from Elisava. So also this will help internally us all to understand ourselves and to work together in common threads. And lastly, and maybe the most important, is that all these internal explorations have to be the stepping stones, the trigger to enhance the interaction with the context, human, non-human, the whole planet, through research, which is key. And here we have to highlight the importance and linking again with beauty and this form materiality, this action research, this practice-based research, these methodologies of research through prototyping that have to be at the, as mentioned, at the first moment of any process, and that we have to understand that are the same level that any other methodology coming from business schools, from architecture schools, or from social sciences environments. And then through these projects, we expect to develop impactful projects, and this links directly to this idea of regional labs. So we expect that this self-reflection on which many students will be working for 1 year will allow to open up new concerns, as mentioned, new ideas that we believe we have to work on, and to clearly showcase which are the capacities, which are the methodologies, which are the narratives we can bring as design schools, and allow this to interact with all the other people and disciplines that are working in the same direction. So this is a little bit a draft of where we are right now, and happy to contribute and to listen to next speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Albert, sort of for sharing this. I have a lot of comments for sure, but maybe we can talk about later in the discussion about that. But I think it gives a very good connection to Carlos, talking not only about the role that this New European Bauhaus, or that the IIT can take for the New European Bauhaus, but also the action lab that you're working on with a slightly different way of collaborating with partners, in my understanding, with a very sort of precise, I've been mentioning the sector, precise sort of nomination or labeling what you're doing in order to make it sort of more accessible for the partners. Carlos, I would be very happy if you could share some of your ideas with us.
Thank you, Philip, and good morning from Chicago to everyone around the world. And I'm Carlos Teixeira. I'm the director of, I'm an associate professor at the Institute of Design in Chicago. And I'm also the director of the PhD program, and now also director of the Action Lab, which I will be talking about. And I was delighted to have a conversation last week with a small group here, led by Philipp, Venka, and Mariana, and share a little bit of what we are doing in the Action Lab. So if you, as I'm going to be talking, feel free to throw questions on the chat, and we can also follow up after our conversation, the conversation here. But just for the sake of time and focus on our conversation here, I just want to let you know that the Action Lab, it's something that is happening as a larger initiative, a larger plan at the Institute of Design, of bringing the school to a new era. And in the Action Lab, is one of the main initiatives that we are working on. So keep that in mind, that it's not an isolated thing. It's a school-wide project, and the Action Lab, it's one of the legs and pillars of that. But the Action Lab, the way that we conceive the Action Lab is as a platform for organizations to collaborate. The reason why we are focused on organizations is because we think that the challenge that we are confronting, the sustainability, equity, governance, the ESGs, the SDGs, we believe that they are of a scale and a complexity that cannot be done with small groups, small projects, and also isolated innovations. It's something that has to work at the system level and requires also the resources of organizations. So when we say organizations, we talk about for-profit organizations, we talk about government agencies, we talk about non-profit organizations, communities. So all different sorts of networks and groups, and but in a way, we are talking about more than an individual, more than just a group. We are talking really about organizations that they have governance, they have resources, they have stability, which allows us to work more on the long term, and with the appropriate resources to deal with the challenge that we are confronting. So one of the key things is that we focus very much on at the level of organizations, and we are working on developing a platform where all those organizations can collaborate with multiple stakeholders and work at the level of infrastructures. So we believe that we need to work at transforming the existing infrastructures. The infrastructures that we have, they were designed for the 20th century in terms of for mass production, mass consumption, and the Bauhaus was a great school that really, in the beginning of the 20th century, took a look at how industrialization was going to shape the world, and really addressed that face head on saying, how do we give some direction? How do we give some principles? How do we give some aesthetics to this new major force, which is industrialization? So I think that we are confronting a similar challenge, not industrialization itself, but similar challenge in terms of sustainability, in terms of justice, and many other forces that will be shaping the 21st century. And we need to start developing the infrastructure for that. We need to start creating the aesthetics of that. We need to create the service for that, the products for that, the communication, the vocabulary, the language. So we believe that this is a long-term project of designing the infrastructures that will provide us the possibility of navigating these challenges. So in that way, we are talking about the Action Lab being a convener of purpose-driven entrepreneurial ecosystems. So if I unpack a little bit of that, the notion of purpose-driven is that we need to focus on purpose, and we need to bring multiple stakeholders to collaborate. But all those stakeholders, they should not work on the mindset of just solving problems, they need to work as ecosystems, but also be entrepreneurial. So I think that we are moving beyond the Silicon Valley kind of single entrepreneurial phase and moving to a more entrepreneurial ecosystems. So multiple organizations working as entrepreneurs, developing the infrastructures of the future. And the Action Lab, it's focused on this notion that design infrastructures requires what Albert was saying. It requires the situation to work in situated actions and context, and prototype those things. Prototype the products, prototype the policies, prototype the engagements, the services. So design will continue to be design and creating the things that we create, but those things need to be seen as a system, as interconnected social material assemblage that are being put together. So we are trying to work on this model of consortium, of bringing multiple organizations, especially the private sector, that has more of the financial resources that can fund those initiatives. But being a funder doesn't mean that you are the only ones that has a seat in the table. So the idea is that we build consortiums that are long-term consortiums that work on several initiatives, sponsoring the work of infrastructure in the future by engaging multiple stakeholders. We have also been working on this idea of that we need to focus on different sectors. So we need to, there is a very specialty knowledge in different sectors. So designing for mobility is very different from designing for food systems. That is also very different from designing for energy. And those are the major industries and sectors that are going through major transformation. And we need to start creating specialized knowledge and know-how in those areas. That's what we are believing in the Action Lab. So the Action Lab, it's kind of, it has its own verticals, such as health, food, and energy. We're gonna also work on mobility, and there is finance, there is media, and think about the major challenges, the ESG challenge that we are confronting in those sectors. So probably, for example, in healthcare, it's more about providing people access to healthcare, one of the biggest challenges. So inclusion, it's one of the biggest challenges. When we talk about media, probably ethics is one of the biggest challenges in those. So we are trying to think about this matrix where the verticals are the sectors, but also we have the purpose coming as the horizontals, that we can create some priorities, and then we can also situate that. So we are working primarily in the context of Chicago, in the context of the United States, and that's how we create those intersections. But they become kind of samples, they become archetypes of kinds of infrastructures that we are designing for the future. So there is this notion of domains that we are working on and creating for the Action Lab. So this is a new initiative that we have at the Institute of Design. We are still in the phase of startup, but our goal is that this lab will be fully functioning and sustainable by 2025, but we are already having the two initiatives, one on food and one on health. The other thing that I want to comment about the Action Lab is that just want to remind that it's very design driven. And one of the things that we are facing as we develop this lab is also the challenge that we don't have the design methodologies, the frameworks, the tools to be able to deal with that. We are still very incipient and very new to this territory. When I say we, I think the design community. Designing at systems level infrastructures, prototyping infrastructures is something that we still don't know how to do. And the methodologies that we have are great: human-centered design, design strategy, and industrial design. All those capabilities that we have developed through time, they are extremely powerful, but I don't think that they are enough for the kind of challenge that we are facing. So the Action Lab is also a place for us to be able to develop and experiment with those new methodologies. So it's also very linked to our master degree, to our PhD degree. So we are taking this notion of participatory action research. So in a way, the Action Lab is also a new learning environment, an environment that brings together not only the multiple stakeholders to work on those projects, but is a production of knowledge for the field of design. And we have the idea of creating also multiple events where we're going to be disseminating and sharing and codifying a lot of the learnings that we have. So we want to be very active on sharing and disseminating the knowledge that's going to be produced over there. So the last thing is to link that into the New European Bauhaus. So is to say that we are official partner. The Institute of Design is official partner, but we want to link the Action Lab as the primary channel of engagement and communication with the New European Bauhaus. We're very proud to be, I think we're the first American institution to be official partner of the New European Bauhaus. I don't know what is the latest status, and I hope there are many more. For us to create this critical mass. But what we discussed with was this notion of being a key partner and being a hub in the United States for the New European Bauhaus. So we are developing this model of a kind of a transatlantic kind of collaboration, given the tradition of the Institute of Design being the New European Bauhaus, when we not only have Moholy-Nagy building the Institute of Design, but at IIT, we also have the School of Architecture that was developed by Mies van der Hoek. So at the same institution, we have two great figures of the Bauhaus coming to the same institution in Chicago, a luxury and a fortune that we have in our tradition. So we consider that we want to develop our own work on the Action Lab, but we're also thinking about how to interact with the New European Bauhaus. And one of the ideas that we have is to create this kind of type of Davos forum at the Institute of Design. So something that can be every year or every 2 years, that we create a forum where projects, concepts, discussions that are going on in the New European Bauhaus and is also going on in the United States and facilitated by the Action Lab, we can create this annual events where we can have this forum in exchange. So the idea is an exchange and not necessarily a direct collaboration on projects, but an exchange of the type of project that the New European Bauhaus are working on, and the American counterpartners are also working on. So this is an initial proposal that we have flooded with the New European Bauhaus, and it seems that they were very excited with that idea. That's why they gave us the official partner to work with them. So I will be more than glad to entertain more conversations and bilateral conversations in other occasions. I don't want to take much of the time here. There are more presenters and more discussion. But Philipp and Mariana and Venka, thank you very much for the opportunity to share what we are doing here. And we are very excited with all those things, despite the fact that we have so many challenges to work on just building a lab like that. But we are in full motion, and we have a lot of support and from everyone to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for giving us that sort of intensive insight, even if in a nutshell from your perspective, into both the Action Lab, but also what you are doing on behalf of the New European Bauhaus. And to me, that it's a super interesting link. So this idea when you shared the hub, and I think maybe we need some more hubs to encourage. I mean, we had Monica de Ruovo, for example, from Cape Town here. She had to leave. So how to establish this sort of types of labs and hubs and connections. So I think here's something where we can sort of learn from your practice to not make it just a transatlantic collaboration, but a collaboration with other continents as well. And I'm happy to connect right now, maybe the Action Lab with Teresa, who's not only the director of DESIS and of course of the DESIS lab in Aveiro, but also professor in Aveiro, and who's running the design factory there. And I know that she's doing, so she has a lot of focus in the private sector and the collaborations with industry. What is slightly different, of course, than DESIS, because I was asking you, Carlos, why does the Action Lab doesn't become a DESIS lab? But I understood it. So maybe I give the mic to Teresa right now. Let's try to stay in the 7 or 8 minutes because we're already behind schedule, but it's super interesting to listen to you. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Philip. Hello, everyone. Let me start by congratulate Cumulus, Mariana, Philipp, Venka for this initiative. And I also like to thank the invitation to be here and to be part of this process. I will be talking with a double role. On one hand, as associate professor at the University of Aveiro, that is a recent New European Bauhaus partner and has a European location, and as DESIS Network International Coordinator, that is also a recent NEB partner, but in this case with a global outlook. For those who don't know DESIS yet, DESIS is a network of design-led research labs based in universities around the world, created to trigger and support social change towards sustainability. We use design thinking and design knowledge to co-create with local, regional, and global partners socially relevant scenario solutions and communication programs. The network was created back in 2009 and connected to the wave of social innovation that characterized that period, that were innovations emerging mainly from grassroots initiatives aiming to solve in a collaborative way problems that people had to face in mature industrial societies. Today, the network has more than 55 labs in design schools in the 5 continents, and 40 of them are Cumulus members. In the past decade, there are 3 themes that have gradually emerged in the design community at large and internally within the DESIS network. One of them was the recognition of social, cultural, and biological diversity as vital resources to nurture and protect all living species and environments. Another one was the interdependencies between natural systems and our own lives. And the third one was the importance of the commons for the well-being of all communities as a starting point for designing. And these themes guide the work of the DESIS labs, fostering and supporting this new wave of eco-social innovations. The DESIS network is working to collaboratively build platforms for teaching and research and to guide and strengthen the transition towards a more resilient, diverse, and non-anthropocentric sustainable world. One of the network goals is to commit to a politics of design based on care and solidarity in order to advance equity, inclusion, and social justice goals. And we plan to continue to do so through the courses we teach, the research topics we take, and the projects we create. The DESIS labs, they are very active, practice-based, using participatory and co-design methodologies, and they have a meaningful impact on the communities they are part of. Each of them has its own program and their own activities, and we have been learning a lot with each other lately with the initiative of the DESIS Café, where a DESIS lab can be the host and share their projects and difficulties with the rest of the network. And for the New European Bauhaus initiative, it is quite important to have a more global and diverse vision on how to act together for a common goal on sustainability and to nurture a dialogue between diverse cultures and stakeholders. For instance, there's labs in some countries in South America, United States, Canada, China, South Korea, Ghana, just to name some, have been exchanging best practices that Europe might consider when tackling some of our specific problems. So our desire is to produce knowledge with the contribution of different partners in an open process, and that can be used by all stakeholders with open results. One of our initiatives, Conversations for the Planet, is part of the DESI's coordination program activities, is a tool to build and share knowledge through debates and reflections about ongoing or prospective social initiatives for the planet. We will have 1 or 2 keynote speakers that will discuss the issue of environmental sustainability, fostering reflection and new challenges to our DESI's labs. The next conversations, by the way, is planned to take place on the 30th of September under the topic of social innovation and the post-catastrophic condition as part of the new normality. And in this framework, we intend to invite also main actors of the New European Bauhaus to present it and introduce some of its central themes. In general terms, the DESI's network, through its members, will contribute to a creative and innovative approach to social and environmental problems in Europe, but also worldwide. As the core activity of DESI's network is social innovation and environmental sustainability, it is aligned with the European Green Deal and the main goals of the New European Bauhaus. And it's a work in progress that we are recent members, so we are working on that. As for the University of Aveiro, it's interesting that the initiative to become a NEB partner came from the rectory, with the pro-rector for sustainability and the vice-rector for research taking the lead. All the research units were invited to propose activities within the New European Bauhaus framework, and the research units from chemistry to materials, health, electronics are actively involved and committed with the Sustainable Development Goals. I do believe that the interdisciplinary approach of the university will facilitate the design of alternative ways of living, producing, consuming in a collaborative way. Also, the physical proximity between departments in the campus is also a plus for this collaboration to be more fruitful. And the recognition of design as an important player in the innovation ecosystem, technical, social, and cultural, and its early involvement in the innovation programs, I think it will enable it to play a pivotal role in the creation of future scenarios, namely in the New European Bauhaus initiatives. This process is still open and it's very new. It's in progress, and we are currently, I am involved also with the rectory on this. We are currently working on the proposals that came from the research units and try to leverage synergies between the different departments and the research units. So we don't know what is going to come out of this, but we hope that for sure a transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach will occur for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I think this resonates a lot with me. I like these conversations for the planet and bringing this together with the Davos Forum. I like the idea. We had a similar sort of concept or ambitious concepts as well in our working group. I think this initiative has the potential also, especially with the regional labs, to give visibility and a platform for the smaller scale members and their ecosystems also to arrive on the map of others and to get some visibility. Those ones who are not as lucky as in your case, where the rectorate sort of said, okay, I'm taking the lead in applying for that. So I think it's really, we need to try to embrace and find, and this was our intention, to get all the schools and people in the schools that are interested to come up with a bottom-up process to participate. And this, of course, then can be connected. And second, I was, of course, thinking when we talked about the regional labs, wow, this could be connected to the DESIS lab somehow as partnerships or whatever. So those things might emerge in further conversations. As time is flying and we're behind of schedule, and I don't know how much time you're having, I would be very, very keen right now to hear the perspective of Alessandro, how this sounds to him actually, this, because we're pretty much on a meta level right now, and small things were sort of popping up that are sort of easily understandable and accessible. And I think this needs to be the next step from our side, as we mentioned, with the Atlas and with the first regional labs to be discussed in a couple of months. So Alessandro, I would be very keen to hear your perspective and your experience in the last month with all the different activities.
Okay, super. Thanks a lot, Philipp. There's a lot that could be commented, but the first thing that I would like to do is to point you to what has been collected until now. So that because we promised at the beginning of the whole process that the co-design phase would be a bottom-up process, but also open, and the result would be shared. So if I can share the screen, I'll show you where super quickly where you can find all the resources, because they are already online. So we have changed before the break briefly. The website, it will be changed again in September. But if you go, for example, on the high-level roundtable and you enter into the high-level roundtable vision, you have their concept paper in here, so it's accessible. And this concept paper went directly, obviously, to the president, that in any case has access to all the rest of the material. And just to very quickly answer to one of the notes that I saw from Professor Takara in the chat, you will see that one of the bullet points on inclusion mentions the fact of this moving beyond design for humans or human-centered, etc., and bringing in this dimension of planetary life. But it's recurring. There's also a part on what we here it's called aesthetics. And I think that it's in this sense it makes sense to underline the fact that aesthetics is also understood not just as a quality of a final product, but it's a part of the process, and so the quality of experience is and can be detached by the quality of the final result. We can have very ugly things produced by very beautiful interactions, no? And so that's a bit ugly intended in by the canons of aesthetics and so on. So that's a bit one of the things that you can access. Then the other contributions are also available in the co-design tab. And over here you have all the short stories. So this is 1,800 contributions that are all accessible. And then you have the free-form contributions. It was essentially papers and essays and so on that were uploaded. And when you download this file, you have a zip file with all the PDFs that were given, and an Excel that helps navigate a bit the different topics and so on. And if you go, for example, into the examples, we have tried to create a kind of a way to access all the different examples in different ways, by impact, by type. And if you go by impact, you have over here design and planning, environment, education. So this is in a certain sense where these examples, what are they related to? If you click on each one of these dots, then you can access directly the story that was shared. You can copy it in your copy box and then have it. We're going to improve a little bit the navigation, but this is the idea of basically making everything accessible, so that even for your atlas or for other forms of research, you may want to use this as at least a part of the inspiration. So this is a bit what we have. All of this has inspired the communication, which is this policy document that will be presented during the State of the Union. What I can tell about that, and essentially what came out from all the contributions, is that I mean, there are clearly two levels of the New European Bauhaus. One is the cultural level, and so the attempt to create a change in culture, and this is not just a European discourse. This is not just a European challenge. It's a challenge that is extended to the entire planet. So that's why it's relevant also what you're doing of opening up to the rest. And we kind of know that to change cultures, we need to change processes, and the process for us to learn things, so the learning process is one of the maybe most fundamental. And so if we start to introduce new methods, new ways into the learning processes, then we most likely, or we have a chance to change the culture of the future, not in ours. So that's one part. The second part is the institutional, and that's the part that is about the actual initiatives, the policy tools, the policy documents, and so on. And that's, I would say, the part that is more connected to the being European, not just because of the the reach that the European Commission and the European institutions have. But I would not really make a solid separation between the global and the European dimension, if not just because of the that reason. I've heard a lot the lab approach as something that comes out a lot. I can already tell you that the lab approach is going to be fundamental for the delivery phase. So we are aligned on that. I personally, but this is a comment that is even out of the institution, don't like too much the idea of lab, because it gives an idea of something separated from reality. It's a lab, it's a place where you make experiments in a controlled environment, and maybe a playground, or it's more related to how animals learn by playing, how we learn without being in a school, which is by playing. And so personally, I would like more this idea of, but then maybe playground is not institutional enough, it's not serious enough, or it's not cannot be taken as seriously as a lab. But maybe those of you who may want to experiment with these ideas also, that really, if we change the formats, we change also the narrative, the language attached to it, then we create the conditions also for those that are more formal to follow. And I would say that, yeah, I would stop simply, so that maybe we can have a more open conversation.
Thank you, Alessandro. I'm just reading what John is saying. I prefer compost heap to lab. I mean, of course, I mean, this is where the things happen. This is where the things are connected. This is where new things are emerging. I think playground is very nice. It's of course, it doesn't seem to be academic. We're talking about sandboxes, but I think we're very influenced by the idea of the living labs that connect the ivory towers of the academies to the outside world, and opening ourselves to leave our buildings, to go to where the people are, and to interact with them. And of course, I think the terminology still might be a little bit bulky to invite all the people, but what's behind sort of makes sense. To me, the lab is not only for the delivery phase. To me, the lab is also for the exploration phase and for the investigation phase with the methodologies of design that we're trying to develop in this phase. I don't know, Venka, how you would sort of respond to that with the terminology of lab, because we discussed that as well. I mean, would it be meetups or whatever, but something between lab and compost.
Yeah, so now I think, you know, in many ways we did debate about the terminology and the framework, but I think on many levels we were more interested in the spirit of intent, you know, and what we were planning to do, you know, and clearly, you know, the titles will matter and are evolutionary, and they could of course transform themselves as we evolve and gather more feedback. But the whole idea was to really develop conversations and be a safe space for people to bring in unconventional ideas and approaches into a particular space in order to break out of, you know, known methodologies and all of that, and give voice to those who might otherwise not have a space for it. So I think that the spirit of the intent was an important one, and how we structure that and provide for that engagement and the conversation, I think is critical. So I think that you know, I think in the currency of in the climate of currency, you know, labs have don't have a particularly good locale, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. All right, so we are quite mindful of that, but I think, you know, we'll take on board the feedback, you know, and see how we evolve this, you know, and I think different members are also giving interesting ideas. The concept of play is quite an interesting one, because I think, you know, play is almost, you know, philosophically and existentially quite an interesting dynamic that brings different ideas and frictions together in order to facilitate a different kind of approach to emerge. So play can be quite an interesting one, but it also needs to be fostered and nurtured quite differently in order for that, especially at the institutional level, when we bring institutions and communities together.
Philipp, if you don't mind if I make a quick comment.
Yeah, please.
Just adding to all that we said, the key thing that I would like to also highlight is the importance of dissemination. I think that we can provide the forum or the space and for us to develop new practice, for us to run the projects. But I think that design as a practice, it's one of those activities that are not yet fully equipped in terms of connecting this notion of codifying and disseminating. I think it becomes something that becomes too much of a formula, kind of a method, and then becomes kind of this template that everybody's replicating. So I think that when I see what Alessandro was presenting today, I can imagine how much knowledge is embedded in all those projects. Mm-hmm. And knowing the project is not what is our intent. We also want to build the knowledge of how to do those projects, of how we learn from each other. So I think that whatever name that we give to those collaborations and engagements, I think that it's very important that we also have channels, not the traditional ones of papers and conference, because they don't follow the speed through which we are learning, and we need to disseminate that knowledge. So I just want to add that component of the knowledge disseminated that we, from what we are creating those activities, is a very critical thing to do.
I think this is also a very important point for Cumulus, because Cumulus has been built around 2 conferences a year for 30 years. And it's of course about encounter, about networking, but also about the dissemination of network. And we're using quite traditional methods in the moment, like publications. So I think these formats that are emerging from working group that will get a new notion up to those labs maybe, or playgrounds or Agora. Thank you, Teresa, for that comment, or gardens. Thank you, Andy, for that. Are super interesting. I would invite the audience. Some already had to leave 1 minute before the announced deadline of 90 minutes. How that sort of resonates with you, and if you have sort of any sort of spontaneous thoughts about that, if that would sort of be able to be aligned with something that you have been thinking of anyway, or how you would sort of respond to that. You have to digest.
Philip, if I may, Adam.
Please, Adam.
Just a quick reflection on the dissemination piece that was just mentioned. I think something we're looking at with Cumulus as well, this balance between dissemination in traditional forms, as Carlos mentioned, through publication, and I suppose the archiving of that so it's accessible and researchable by future generations. I think we've all experienced the last maybe 20, 30 years of digitization, that huge quantities of knowledge are being lost. And when they're not being committed to paper, they're being committed to digital formats which go out of date or become inaccessible. Certainly Cumulus is starting to find this challenge as much as we are as researchers, but then also balancing that with the knowledge creation methods that were mentioned. I really like the discussion around compost heaps, playgrounds, and wild environments, and the I suppose the metaphors that those create in one's head around, and the research associated with that. Is certainly my experience in Ireland of running and being involved with various types of labs and activities over the years have been that exactly that comment, that they tend to be quite controlled environments and quite sometimes disappointing from an impact point of view when you try to scale them into the real world, I suppose. And I always think back to some of the observations that Victor Papanek made in his own writing about this tendency that we have often as designers to work still in these very sort of safe modes and project our work out into the world, assuming that the need is going to be created. But I suppose, I think that the New European Bauhaus generates some really, really interesting opportunities to, especially post-pandemic, to think about the impact of the work that we do with researchers, with students, the impact in society and in the global environment. I'd be a strong believer in non-anthropocentric ways of looking at the world. I think we've been far too anthropocentric since the first Bauhaus, and the time has changed to approach it differently. So it's just a contribution.
Yeah, thank you for that, Adam. I agree to that. I mean, I don't know, maybe Kenan, do you have anything? I was also thinking of you a bit when I was sort of designing together with Venka and Mariana this idea of those labs, playgrounds, compost heaps, actually to give an opportunity to people that, for example, cannot join EU-funded projects and so on, and to have Cumulus as a global association who could support such a local activity and connect it without currently knowing exactly what it means budget-wise, resources-wise, but if it's understood not as a lab that will be established forever or for 5 years, but as a thing that will go on for 1 or 2 days, but of course it will sustain a bit because it will create some local networks. Is there something that could sort of resonate with you, or?
Thank you, Philip, and thank you for inviting me to comment on this. I mean, yeah, you pointed out already that it is a case. I mean, New European Bauhaus is mostly related to EU countries, and I see connection also with IIT Institute in Chicago, and I see natural connection to this. But I mean, in terms of Balkan countries that are not part of the EU, that's it's really hard to make a breakthrough unless we find a way to link institutions, educational institutions, whichever institutions could contribute to partners that are part of the core EU new Bauhaus European project. So that would be the only way to have people engaged and to make it visible. I mean, I have to be pragmatic in saying how would it operate. That would be the only way how people could engage. Also, there is a legacy of Bauhaus, not as visible as elsewhere, but I mean, here in this kind of, to say that phrase, crossroad of a civilization or the eastern border of Europe. I mean, right now we are not even on the border. We are kind of an island. Balkan is an island in the European Union. And there is a legacy of Bauhaus, and there are tendencies that could be kind of aligned with the new Bauhaus, new European Bauhaus. And I think it would be good to find a way to connect, because there are also researchers investigating the legacy of Bauhaus and presence of Bauhaus through in a local kind of heritage. But definitely that would be great if we could find a way to connect. And anyhow, any way to find a way to express and to connect the dots of international aspect of this initiative that would engage all parts of Europe would be really great. So I mean, I'm still processing everything I've heard, but I've heard a lot of good things, and also I have to I just said a few things from my point of view and from point of view of institutions here and organizations that could participate into this. I hope I clarified at least a bit.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I think we need to become a little bit clearer about sort of the ideas, because I think this is the intention. It's always the chicken and egg problem. Of course, everybody sort of was free to sort of apply or submit, but we wanted to give a space where exactly what you've been talking about could have the opportunity to engage with a very sort of low threshold and become partner and look at specific phenomena or engine from different perspectives, and thus find a way to create new knowledge, to create new methodologies to acquire knowledge, but also to disseminate knowledge. And this is what I think was so exciting about those compost labs, labs actually. And I think lowering the threshold seems to be something that sounds crucial to me. But on the other hand, I don't know, maybe because Carlos, I agree, is that sort of we need to think of dissemination as well. We need to think of talking to partners. I don't know how BMW would resonate with a compost heap. Maybe it's super interesting to them because labs are everywhere nowadays.
No, I think while dissemination is an important vector of what we do, I think it's also about bridging.
Yes.
You know, bridging, and I think that's one of the fantastic opportunity that I think these projects provide for, because you know, whether it's the Atlas of Opportunities or whether it's the compost heap or the labs, you know, they are bridging, you know, different ideas, different socias, different spaces, you know, to come together, have conversations, and really, you know, birth new ways of thinking and approaches. So I think on many levels we are talking about the frameworks that can enable these things to happen, you know, and to be as free and democratic as much as possible. And how will we enable that? So you know, perhaps we can work out the terminologies, but I think it's really the specificities of the intent. You know, how do we want participants to express themselves, and how do they want to engage with the kinds of issues that they are interested in, you know, and it could be a myriad of things. So, like Keenan said, the inside-outside parameter, of the Balkans and the Europe itself is a very interesting conversation piece, right? Then can foster how do we design new bridges, outside of, geopolitical bridges. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there that we might need to build on, and I think gives us a lot more things to think about. And those frameworks can almost be very fractal-like, and bouncing off each other, and not necessarily, coalescing and coming to one particular site. They are actually bouncing off as constellations everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I want to share with you the link right now, and maybe want to go back to what we've been talking about for quite a while. Of course, I mean, here's a global map, and we said, okay, we need one partner outside of EU or Europe, at least, to sort of have this looking inside and outside, and what we've been thinking of. So those regional labs, to make it really, really super simple to understanding the context by city reports from unique creative perspectives, by artists, designers, policymakers, activists, adding grassroots approaches to designing Europe, like issues-based sharing about biodesign. This might be sort of one of the aspects. And then what seems to be very inside and very, very crucial is this looking from outside in, views from outside Europe on Europe, or look across the border wherever you put the border, and borders become a very new notion if you talk about bioregions, for example. And part 4 is what networks and actions, outcomes, and building relations. So this is what should emerge after such a two-day session, two-day touch point conversation. Actually, I think this is the expertise that you bring in, Venka, after sort of developing this concept in the sort of in the region. Let me maybe share with you just very briefly how we want to proceed, because Mariana left, and in all my conversations with Mariana, there's the moment where she says, "Now I'm putting on my pragmatic hat." And of course, our conversations can be very inspirational, but let's try to sort of make things happen. So what we will do very soon to share the summary of this session, to come up with this call to action that I want to share with you who are still here right now, as an invitation to share your case and to present it in a session by the end of October for the Atlas. And for the regional labs, I think the members are invited to articulate their interest to host a regional lab, knowing that this interest means to start a conversation in smaller groups. And this is what curating means. It means facilitating, it means enabling, to allow you who have this interest to sort of specify in iterations what this could mean, still under the umbrella of Cumulus, with those similarities that we need to be able to learn from the labs, actually. So you have right now more or less 5 weeks time to express your interest by email. Unfortunately, I think we all do not have a Cumulus email, so it's a heidkamp@kis.de email. Sort of, I will share this. Hopefully, if you leave your emails here, we can have a small group where we can sort of circulate the ideas. So we will get back to you with some feedback, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. By end of October, we want to make the first Atlas session where we ask 3 cases to be presented and discussed. And for example, I don't know still if Andy Goodman is still here. I have frequent discussions with him. He's coming up with very interesting projects, like a polar project, what is sort of very transnational and transdisciplinary, but also an innovation center. So he was.
Yeah, I'm here, Philipp. Hi.
Hi, Andy. So you're still here, so you're listening. So I think
I'm listening.
You know that this should sort of speak to you. So the idea is, I think here the threshold is a little bit smaller or lower actually, so that we can really start to collect those cases, and they can be very different, and based on those cases to then shape the lenses that we want to look at the cases. And I also had the idea to invite a colleague from the IF Foundation who wrote this sort of wonderful, the blurry thing, white book here on designing design education. Of course, I'm in touch with him. He said he created something where others have to build upon. And of course, it's not a recipe to design education, but those are key insights from a long process of sort of designing design education. And I think this would be an interesting opportunity to sort of resonate in that direction. And then we said, as it's a little bit more complex, a bit later by the beginning of November, that we have the first regional lab session, and this means to discuss ideas and concepts, what this could mean. And Venka, I think we said from clarification of the first ideas until making it happen, there's something like a 6-month time. So therefore we said we are super ambitious, but let's aim at creating in next year 3 labs. So any sort of articulation of interest is super welcome. And I think we need to explore with the board of Cumulus how we can support this. Of course, one of the first questions is there any opportunity of financial support? Because it's both investigation of a topic that's highly relevant for others and dissemination in the same way, and we're supporting those activities. So we hope that something will happen in between, that by March or April, I avoid to say spring because spring is not all over the world. At the same time, we hope to have the first sort of regional lab that can pioneer where we can learn from, but having 2 others in the pipeline, I think creates a small consortium where we can discuss about. And of course, don't forget, we have this incredible conferences. So we have in June and September, we have 2 Cumulus conferences in Russia and the United States. Interestingly enough, so I think those were the moments where we could sort of report back, and this New European Bauhaus initiative is an initiative of Cumulus. So this means we will sort of establish a loop with our members to share and to share with them and to invite them to contribute. And by the end of 23, we could have something like a half-day symposium. Maybe we need to find a better word. Maybe we call it a garden party and a way of sort of publication. And I know, Andy, why you suggested the word of garden, because on your boards I always see the garden, and I think metaphorically also how our relation to nature environment is changing. Garden seems to be a very suitable terminology for that. So this is what we had in mind. I invite you to attend, to look a little bit at this board here. We also put a world map. So some of you left in the chat where you are from. So we add this here in the chat. We also have a small box. So this is me. I put my first in here. Why are you here? What do you want to contribute? So this is an easy opportunity for you right now, while you digest, to articulate yourself and to share with the other members in the community your perspective. Yeah, so that's it for the moment from my side, because we are over time, and I think to respect all of your time. I mean, I still have time, so I'm happy to discuss with you if there are any sort of further questions or suggestions. But everybody who had to leave at the full hour, please feel free to leave. I want to use this opportunity once again to, on behalf of Cumulus, to thank our speakers, Carlos, Albert, Alessandra, and Teresa. I think this was very important and very inspiring. And Alessandro, thank you very much for pointing again on this very complex representation of the even more complex sort of networks and nodes behind. I'm sort of fascinated by that. But I still haven't found the proper representation of a platform that is connecting all those dots. So that's a challenge. Again, I think then it's the messy environment of a conference coffee table or compost that sometimes is better. But I think the secret might be in connecting both of them. And I think Cumulus has the potential do so. So Alessandro, thank you for sort of pointing again also on those high-level roundtable. Maybe I will get back to you to see sort of how we can contribute. Of course, I was sort of attending recordings of the ones with Shigeru Ban. I think that's really super inspiring sort of on this high level. And this might be, for example, a part of our garden party at a later stage. So
super, thank you.
I'm looking forward how you are responding to all the grassroots activities that were emerging. Because of course, being an official partner is super good and important. Being connected in the right way with the right people is the next step that will help us, and sort of being visible, especially for our members, is super crucial. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Venka. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Yes, I think we'll work on the compost idea, or compose,
yes.
or compose. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hope to meet you all soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Leave your
everyone.
traces
Bye.
and
Thank you.
comments on conversations on the Miro board.
Thank you.